Interested in learning about the Pioneer format? I'm going to tell you what it is and everything you need to know about it to decide whether or not you want to play it, and I'm going to do it so fast. This intro is already wasting a load of time, so let's get started. Also, please click our like button, Steven, under the video. He gets lonely. Pioneer is a non-rotating constructed format that lets you use cards from Return to Ravnica forward, so effectively the last 10.5 years. Think of it as mini-modern, but with one fantastic difference, the ban list. Pioneer's ban list is heavily curated and includes possibly the most important bans in all constructed formats, the fetch lands. This mana fixing being banned is a godsend and has helped to create one of the most balanced and diverse formats in the history of Magic. Let's talk about the kinds of decks you can expect to see, and keep in mind, every single deck I talk about is not only viable, but powerful, and basically equally likely to win matches and entire events. We'll start with aggro, then mid-range, control, ramp, and finally combo. Monoid Humans is a classic tribal aggro strategy and the current best performing aggro deck in the format. It starts very low to the ground with Dauntless Bodyguard, Hopeful Initiate, Recruitment Officer, and Thalia. Get humans down early and apply pressure. Then it adds value-ridden humans, Thalia's Lieutenant, Adeline Resplendent Cathar, Brutal Cathar, and Luminarch Aspirant. Some versions run Ossification for additional cheap removal, many run Brave the Elements to be even more aggressive, then a playset of Mutavault, some Aganjo, Seat of the Empire, sometimes Castle Arden Vale, and it's off to the races after that. Rarely plagued with a bad opening 7, Humans is a consistent strategy that has the capacity to perform well in all events. If you like aggro, this is your best bet right now. Gruul Vehicles is what you describe as a big aggro deck. The deck is named Vehicles because of the 100% inclusion rate of Sky Sovereign Console Flagship and Esika's Chariot, two of the best vehicles made for constructed play and both difficult to deal with. To crew these, the rest of the deck is dedicated to creating a blisteringly fast board presence. Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic help to cast Reckless Stormseeker and Miglow's Maze Crusher quickly. Lovestruck Beast is an easy pilot, Bone Crusher Giant is a dual-purpose removal spell and pilot, and Scavenging Ooze is fast value and also a potential pilot. To keep up the aggression, there are oftentimes multiple copies of the Akroan War to close out games, and Obliterating Bolt because 4 damage against a walker or creature is kind of a magic number in this format, and the deck doesn't need burn to hit a player. It does that well enough with its permanence. Straightforward, big Gruul deck right in the middle of aggro and mid-range. This is what you want if you want something fast but also chonky. The next best aggro deck right now is Lithuania Angels. Not as consistent as humans or vehicles, Angels can still get the job done, but the deck noticeably lacks interaction, which is a gamble in the current meta. Bishop of Wings, Giada, Font of Hope, and Youthful Valkyrie are your early drops to synergize with your big angel baddies, Resplendent Angel and Righteous Valkyrie, aiming to gain a massive amount of life quickly, which in turn will let you create an army of giant angels. The deck includes Skyclave Apparition as the lone method of interaction, at least normally. Some versions are running Inspiring Overseer as another card advantage angel, and some are running Skrelv as insurance against removal. What makes this deck so dangerous, you ask? Collected Company and Kayla's Reconstruction. Both spells hit every creature in the deck, and their enter the battlefield triggers all go off at the same time, creating a massive board presence. This deck is unique among aggro decks as a life gain strategy and does have access to interesting sideboard tech like Radiant, God of the Worthy, and Ajani Strength of the Pride, but it is worth noting it's probably a half tier lower than the other aggro decks mentioned. Izzet Phoenix is a blue-red spell-slinging deck that uses elements of aggro and control strategies. Thinking the Ice, Ledger Shredder, and Arclight Phoenix are how the strategy wins, and that should tell you all you need to know about the rest of the deck. It's all non-creature spells, the best and cheapest non-creature spells in the format. Consider Opt, Pieces of the Puzzle, and Chart a Course of the cheap and powerful cantrips. Fiery Impulse, Lightning Axe, Spikefield Hazard, and Spell Pierce are the cheap removal and disruption spells. Galvanic Iteration lets you cast them again, then Treasure Cruise and Temporal Trespass abuse the graveyard and the Broken Delve mechanic, letting you do powerful things on the cheap. And if all this doesn't get you there, Hall of Storm Giants brings some late gameplay. The deck is dead quick and loads of fun. If you're an Izzet spell-slinging mage, you can exist in Pioneer just fine. The best mid-range deck and arguably the current best deck in the format is Rakdos Midrange. Simply put, the deck plays the best and most efficient black and red cards in the format. 4 different creatures are consistent throughout variations. Blood Tithe Harvester for an early drop card filtering and or removal, Bone Crusher Giant as a 2-for-1, Graveyard Trespasser, Graveyard Hate and real annoying to remove, and Sheoldred the Apocalypse, one of the best creatures printed in the last decade. There are some other creatures that make it into variations, but these 4 creatures make up the core of the deck. Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Reckoner Bankbuster always find their way in, then it's all just hand attack and removal. Liliana of the Veil, Fatal Push, Power Word Kill, and Dreadbore are common includes, then Thoughtseize is a staple and Duress sometimes finds its way in. With the recent addition of Mutavault to the land base, this deck has grown a bit stronger and even more consistent. Lastly, Rakdos Midrange has a powerful sideboard compared to other top tier decks, allowing it to maneuver around even its worst matchups. Extinction Event, Pithing Needle, Ritual of Soot, Go Blank, more Duress, and plenty more Silver Bullets fill the sideboard. It's probably the best deck right now, but it is close. A new mid-range strategy that surfaced at the Pro Tour and is now doing quite well is Omnif to Light, or 5-color Omnath mid-range, with Omnath replacing Niv Mizzet, the previous 5-color value boss. The deck is named after using powerful Rainbow 2 to Bring to Light to grab Omnath, Locus of Creation, and while it is a powerful pair of cards thanks to Bring to Light, this mid-range deck functions more like a toolbox strategy than a pure mid-range deck. There are straight up good cards like Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Chain to the Rocks, Leyline Binding, Courier's Briefcase, and Sylvan Caryatid for your fixing, value, removal, and even more fixing needs, but then you get the toolbox that can be adjusted to match your metagame. Valky, God of Lies, Selfless Glyph Weaver, Hostage Taker, Elish Norn, Mother of Machines, Extinction Events, Slaughter Games, and Escape to the Wilds are all one-ofs in this shell, allowing you plenty of space in deck building to include whatever you need for any given event. Azuria's Control is the current best pure control deck in the format. The Wandering Emperor and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, lead the value-laden spell-based charge. Dovin's Veto, Absorb, sometimes Censor, sometimes Make Disappear, and sometimes Juari Disruption make up the counter package. Supreme Verdict, March of Otherworldly Light, Farewell, Fatal Absence, Temporary Lockdown, and sometimes Lay Down Arms provide a large amount of creature removal to ensure that the deck even makes it to the late game, with Shark Typhoon doing a great impression of a cycling card early game and a win condition much later, and then Hall of Storm Giants, and sometimes Castle of Ardenville to close the match out when your opponent has nothing left to do. The deck works the same way all control decks work, disrupt and removal early and efficiently while maintaining card advantage, then winning late with a Shark or a Giant or a Million Samurai. Next up is 5-color Enigmatic Fires, the most dedicated toolbox strategy in the format with a unique playstyle and deck build. The strategy is named after Enigmatic Incarnation and Fires of Invention. Incarnation is the enchantment used to enable the toolbox, and Fires of Invention smooths everything out for you, letting you play your hand regardless of colored mana requirements. Enigmatic Incarnation requires a lot of enchantments to be consistent. Going up the curve, the deck runs Chain to the Rocks at 1, Bitter Reunion, Wolf Willow Haven, Nylea's Presence, and Oath of Chandra at 2, Fable of the Mirror Breaker at 3, and the Super Boss 6-drop Leyline Binding. Incarnation lets you sack an enchantment for a creature that is 1 mana value higher than what you sacrifice. You can answer any number of threats, going up the creature curve of what is available to you. Destiny Spinner for counter protection, Knight of Autumn for naturalizer life gain, Moonblast Cleric gets you the enchantments you need, Skycleave Apparition as removal, Glasspool Mimic to double up on value, Hanged Executioner for exile removal, Deputy of Detention for removal, Archon of Sons of Grace for lifelink, Cavalier of Dawn for its absurd triggers, Tolsimir for survival, Kenrith for everything, Elish Norn to shut down triggers, and thanks to Leyline Binding being 6 mana value even though you'll never spend 6 to cast it, Titan of Industry for game domination, and Agent of Treachery to steal whatever you want. Leyline Binding turning into a 7 mana creature for the cost of 1 white mana a lot of the time is nuts. The mana base is all Shocklands and Triomes as you'd expect, and yes, playing this is incredibly complicated and will take a while to get used to, but if you do pick it up and you enjoy toolbox strategies like this, you'll have more fun than you've had in Magic since before Birthing Pod was banned in Modern. Monogram ramp starts as a normal ramp deck. Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves, Oath of Nissa, and Wolf Willow Haven help you get the early mana you need to cast Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns quickly. Some games end right there, but if they don't, then you get to show your opponent the other side of Monogram Devotion Ramp, an infinite combo deck of milling and pain. I'm going to do my best to explain this combo quickly, so if you have questions, let me know in the comments. This is a very short explanation. The deck probably deserves its own video, to be honest. So you need a bunch of green Devotion, Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, 2 Karn the Great Creator, and 2 Kiora Behemoth Beckoner. When on the battlefield, the other in your yard or your hand. You tap Nykthos for a bunch of green mana, use Kiora to untap it, tap it again for more mana, use Karn's -2 to grab the Chain Veil from your sideboard, cast that and activate it, giving all your walkers another activation. Now this also applies to walkers that aren't on the battlefield yet, so yeah, that's broken. Kiora untaps Nykthos again, you get even more mana, Karn goes to -2 and grabs Pestilent Cauldron from your sideboard. You cast the backside Restorative Burst, returning Karn and Kiora to your hand. Each player gains 4 life and you exile the burst, but it gets exiled as the Cauldron since that's its front face. Cast new Kiora, untap Nykthos, get more mana, untap it again because your Kiora has multiple activations thanks to the Chain Veil literally changing the rules of a Magic game. Cast your new Karn, -2 Karn to get the Pestilent Cauldron back from exile, cast Burst again, returning the Karn and Kiora that got legend rolled when you played the previous copies. It's at this point you can pretty much loop Restorative Burst, replaying walkers, untapping Nykthos, grabbing the Cauldron from exile, and gaining infinite life for both you and your opponent, which leads to how you kill them, the front face of Pestilent Cauldron. You make your opponent mill cards equal to the amount of life you gain this turn, which is infinite, so they mill out and die. To get the black mana to cast this spell, you use Karn to grab Reckoner Bankbuster from your sideboard, play it, activate its ability, untap it with Kiora twice, then on the last activation it makes a treasure token that you sacrifice for black mana, and boom. An absurdly convoluted and ridiculous combo that is way more complicated than I made it out to be, but you get the gist. Monogram Devotion Ramp combo, amazing deck, toxic as all heck. Lotus Field combo is the most prolific combo deck in the format and revolves around its namesake card. This strategy untaps Lotus Field as many times as possible to create an absurd amount of mana and cast powerful spells until the game's over. Vizier of Tumbling Sands and Hidden Strings are the staple untapped spells in the deck. Sylvan Scrying specifically targets Lotus Field and Thespian Stage if you already have a field out and want to copy it. While Pour Over the Pages, Impulse, Dark Petition, Shimmer of Possibility, and Behold the Beyond can either dig for the field or if you're already going off by untapping the field over and over again, these cards can find you Emergent Ultimatum, Omniscience, and Mastermind's Acquisition, which gives you access to a plethora of win conditions in your sideboard. Thanks to the explosive nature of this combo, your sideboard is full of greedy cards. Zakama, Approach of the Second Sun, Sphinx of the Final Word, and Dragonlord Dromoka, just to name a few. Variations of the deck also include Baral, Chief of Compliance, and Lear, Disciple of the Drowned, to give even more card filtering. This is a pure combo deck in the sense that without the combo, it does virtually nothing. It has the least amount of interaction of any deck we've looked at, so if you want a pure, real combo deck, Lotus Field is a great choice. Is It Creativity is a blue-red combo deck that wins the game by casting Indomitable Creativity on your own tokens to get Xenagos, God of Revels, and World Spine Worm onto the battlefield. Both enter the battlefield, World Spine Worm gets +15/+15 and haste from Xenagos, and you swing in with a 30/30 trampler. The rest of the deck functions like a blue-red spell-slinging deck with a focus on creating tokens. Fable of the Mirror Breaker and Shark Typhoon are joined by Secrets of the Key, Big Score, and Sokenzin, Crucible of Defiance as token producers in the deck. Impulse, Dig Through Time, and Valakut Awakening find your creativity as fast as possible. Make Disappear and Spell Pierce stem early annoyances and protect your combo, then Fiery Impulse, Spikefield Hazard, and Fire Prophecy keep you alive at a very low cost. The deck is very tight on space and playstyle. You need to not make any mistakes when you're running this deck. Like Lotus Field, without your combo, there isn't much you can do, so the pilot's very important, but if you put the time in and learn the deck, there isn't much that can consistently stop you. Abzan Grease Fang is a Reanimator combo deck. The goal of the deck is to get Parhelion 2, Esseka's Chariot, or sometimes Sky Sovereign into your graveyard early in the game, then play Grease Fang, Okiba Boss. The trigger happens at the beginning of combat on your turn. You get any of these powerful vehicles on the battlefield, they gain haste, you crew them with Grease Fang and get their broken triggers way earlier than you normally would, especially in the case of Parhelion 2. On turn 3, it's pretty difficult to deal with. Most of the deck is dedicated to finding vehicles and putting them in your graveyard. Rafine's Informant, Satyr Wayfinder, and sometimes Stitcher Supplier or Scrapwork are the creature filter cards. Then there's Grizzly Salvage, Witherbloom Command, and sometimes Traverse the Ulvenwald or Vessel of Nascency. Anything to cheaply filter cards into the graveyard could make its way into this deck. Can't Stay Away is a great way to get back Grease Fang. Then all versions of the deck run Thoughtseize because you need to make sure the way is clear sometimes before dropping your Grease Fang. Definitely the best reanimation deck in that format right now, and pretty fun to boot. Grease Fang is in a real good spot for the meta right now, so happy trampling. The best part about Pioneer is that there are at least 5 to 10 different strategies I haven't covered yet that do decently well in events. Spirits is great, Auras is a deck, Dimir Control is a deck, Rakdos Sacrifice with the Cat Oven combo exists, but even without any of these, I just gave you 12 unique archetypes that all win games and entire events, and no one is surprised to see any of them find success. Pioneer is absurdly healthy, and it's worth giving a shot if you've been itching for a non-rotating format that has a great metagame.